I'm going to talk about imagery. I'm going to talk about how a lot of our memories are constructed around imagery and how that might affect us. I grew up in baby boomer suburbia. When I was 6 years old, my mother took me to New York City, to Rockefeller Center, to the NBC studios, where I sat in the peanut gallery of the Howdy Doody show. Suddenly, I was watching my first TV production behind the scenes. I'd been watching the show for several years intently on a little black and white set in our home, but being there, it was an entirely different experience. I realized that what I accepted as reality on my TV was really a production. That was the first time I ever kind of got behind it. I didn't realize that the real purpose for me to watch the show was to buy the products that were advertised on the show, like Hostess snowballs and also Wonder Bread, which I, of course, knew built better bodies 12 ways. Back in those days with enriched bread, there were enough chemicals in there to build bodies 100 ways. That was really the beginning of my fascination with the media, being behind the scenes there, that eventually led to me becoming a filmmaker. And something else happened on that fateful day in 1956. There was a character on the show. Her name was Princess Summer, Fall, Winter, Spring. She was an Indian, obviously a stereotypical Indian, and she really turned me on. I was like a 6-year-old kid just looking at it. Seeing her on the, in person on the set there, my heart just began to beat incredibly. I mean, it was kind of the beginning of a new era of my life. What I didn't know was this image of the princess. She really wasn't a princess. She was just a Caucasian woman named Judy Tyler, who several years later starred in Jailhouse Rock with Elvis Presley. I didn't know that. I was just a little kid. I just believed everything that came on the set. When I got older, I realized that I had this incredible attraction to exotic women. Now, I don't know if I was predisposed to that or if it was that early programming from Howdy Doody that had such a profound impact in my life. Now, when I got older, I ended up going back to New York, going to NYU Film School in the late 60s, and I was part of the Woodstock generation. I actually had shoulder-length hair. That's hard to believe now. I did go to Woodstock. If you look way up in the corner, I'm there. Something happened to me during that era where I experienced firsthand how people made judgments based on the way you look. Now, I was one of the first group of people who had shoulder-length hair, and certain people shied away from me because of the way that I looked. There was this media image of the hippie as being a protester, as being dirty, as being lazy. So people looked at me with long hair and they thought, that's who this guy is. And in 1969, there was a very popular movie called Easy Rider. It was the first counterculture film. And at the end of the movie, Peter Fonda and Dennis Hopper, who were hippies who had bicycles, were shot by these southern rednecks. People were a little bit shocked by that, but I ended up hitchhiking from New York to San Francisco in the summer of 1970. And I experienced some of that as well, not that violence, but this, if you look that way, you must be a certain type of person. I found that upsetting. And in the past 40 years, the way people look is different, but this image judgment thing still exists. In a large city like New York City, people, and somewhat here in Tucson, there really aren't that many streets to walk down. When you walk down the street and you encounter someone, invariably you make a judgment about them by the way that they look, the way they dress, how they carry themselves, their size. God forbid they should be overweight. And is this human nature, or are we prisoners of imagery? You know, we make these snap judgments. And what's happened now is that appearance has become so important that people are spending billions of dollars a year to change their appearance. And women in particular, we're bombarded by imagery of what women are supposed to look like, what their faces are supposed to look like, what their bodies are supposed to look like. They're held up on a pedestal for us to admire, for women to aspire to. The truth is that most women will never look like that. It's impossible. And also, the negative side of that is there's a lot of men who think that unless a woman looks like this, they can't even pay attention to her. That kind of brainwashing, that subtle brainwashing is happening. Another kind of brainwashing, how many men define eroticism by what they see in pornography? So I go back to my early encounter with Princess Summer, Fall, Winter, Spring, and realize that was just an illusion that was manufactured, just like women can put on makeup and style themselves and create an illusion as well. But what we have to realize is that illusion is not real. The person behind that doesn't necessarily have to be like that. Now, in the case of this woman who had all this plastic surgery, maybe she is, I don't know. But there's certainly no escaping this kind of illusion. And some of the other illusions that were part of my early life because of I grew up on television were about the American family. I got my idea of what life was supposed to be like in America by Leave It to Beaver, My Three Sons, The Donna Reed Show. This created an illusion that life in America was that I would go to college, I would get married, I would get a job, I would have a child, a bunch of children. I'd live happily ever after. I'd come home at 5 o'clock every day. My wife would be waiting with me for dinner, and that was it. But it just didn't turn out to be that way. For me, the moment that illusion was shattered was November 22nd, 1963. That's when reality was completely scrambled. Now, I didn't see the assassination of John F. Kennedy on TV because it wasn't broadcast, but I did see 2 days later when Jack Ruby shot Lee Harvey Oswald in the basement of the Dallas police station. After the police arrested Lee Harvey Oswald on a suspicion of assassinating President Kennedy, they searched his home and they found this photograph, allegedly, of Lee Harvey Oswald holding a rifle similar to the one that was used to kill John F. Kennedy, and also in his right hand, pictures of a couple of communist newspapers, The Militant and The Worker. And his wife, Marina, a Russian immigrant, said that she had taken the photo earlier in 1963. This photo was considered highly incriminating because this supposedly was the rifle that killed JFK. Made public February 1964 on the cover of Life magazine, and shortly thereafter the photograph was printed in newspapers and magazines all around the world. But sharp-eyed observers noted that there was a difference in the photograph. In the Life magazine version on the left, there was a scope on the rifle, a high-definition scope. And on the right side, the photograph on the right, that scope was gone. These differences created suspicions that the photo wasn't real. Now, Oswald himself, when he was being questioned in jail, was shown the photo. He said, "That's not me, somebody superimposed my body on that photo." Was that photo doctored so that it would follow the official story? There's also some 8mm home footage that emerged from Dealey Plaza that day, the infamous Zapruder film. A number of frames were missing from the Zapruder film. Was that film altered to conform with the official story that went into the official version, which is the Warren Commission report? We may never know, but certainly those images are seared into my brain because I was there then, just like this image is seared into everyone's brain today. These stay with us forever. We all have trusted sources for image. If you see a picture in the New York Times, you kind of think it's real, as opposed to the website TMZ or the publication National Enquirer. But Photoshop and CGI make it possible to create any sort of image now, any source of movie. We can insert someone in a photo who wasn't there. We could take someone there who was out, and it looks so totally perfect. So there's a growing disparity between what is real and what is not real in imagery. And because we are bombarded with more images than ever before through the internet, television, our smartphones, whatever, it's up to us to decode these images. Hollywood has long used manipulation of imagery to create certain feelings. When I was a kid, I saw a movie called Earth versus Flying Saucers. I was scared out of my mind. I thought that we were under attack by UFOs, that government buildings in Washington were being destroyed. I was a kid. I didn't know the difference, but I was being manipulated. And the average kid today, between the internet and TV, by the time they're in elementary school, they've already seen 10,000 violent acts, all kinds of things depicted. By the time they're 18, that figure goes up to 250,000. Does this influence young people? Well, it only takes one or two nuts to do that, like the guys who set off the bomb in Boston the other day, or Gerard Loeffner, what he did a couple of years ago in the Safeway. I think that the Manipulation of images now has global impact. Several years ago, during the Arab Spring demonstrations, people uploaded imagery from their cell phones directly to YouTube. Really the first time that people were able to see what was happening in a way that wasn't filtered by the government. People were actually able to get those images up on YouTube. That may have had some impact how people perceived what was happening in these Arab countries. Is there any imagery that could really change the world? Well, you may remember last year on YouTube there was some clips of a low-budget film that outraged conservative Muslim groups around the world. It was called The Innocence of Muslims. And the film portrayed the Prophet Muhammad as a philanderer who condoned child sex abuse. And Muslims consider any portrayal of Muhammad, as little than an insult, as extremely offensive. That set off a firestorm. As we know, the consulate in Benghazi, Libya, was burned during a violent protest about the film and resulting in the death of the U.S. ambassador and 3 other diplomats. Recently, we got some propaganda from North Korea about the nuclear destruction of Washington, D.C. Obviously, from the source of that, we know that's not true. We're going to see more images like this. It's just not going to stop. Now, as a filmmaker, I manipulate images. I manipulate reality. That's one of the magical things about the process of creating movies. But nowadays, with the democratization of photography and filmmaking, anyone can do that. My question to you is, what are you going to do with all these images? How are you going to decode them? And how are you going to find out what's real?